Hello, my name is Masao Suzuki. I teach economics at a local community college here in the San Jose Bay Area, and I'm also a member of the Road my name is Masao Suzuki. I teach economics at a local community college. Update on the state of the economy. I think what's happened in the last week is showing there's, I think, two big developments, which aren't new, but they're confirming what a lot of us thought. I think the first thing, of course, is the continued inaction, disarray among the Republicans, given that the extra $600 a week unemployment aid, which is actually called the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, or FPUC, and I won't use those initials anymore. I'll just call it the $600 a week, is actually expiring at the end of the month. And depending on your state, for example, here in California, they basically expired. And so that is going to be a big cliff. There's somewhere more than 25 million people getting these payments. And with the average national unemployment insurance benefit being a little over $300 a week, this represents a 2/3 cut in people's unemployment. And this $600 a week has been very important because normally unemployment insurance gives people less than half of what they have. And in more normal times, there's always a chance that you can find another job, or you may have some savings or be able to help, or family and friends to fall back on. But in this situation where we have 30 million people who are collecting government aid, and there's another 20 million people who are working, but they've had their hours cut or their wages cut. So that's about 50 million people. That's almost 1 out of 3 of the entire labor force, those people working and not working and looking for work, who have been affected by the crisis. So it's a really big jolt. And it's the $600 a week has been vital for people to, especially paying their rent and mortgages. One of the things that has actually been, I guess, interesting, it's good in a way, is that the numbers of people who are not paying their rent or mortgage it's up. It's up substantially, but it's not anywhere near the 20 or 30 million people who have lost their jobs or a livelihood. But with the end of that $600 a week, that the numbers, like people were looking into, the rent is due in many, in many cases, August 1st. And there's probably going to be a huge jump in people not being able to pay their rent. And already what's happening in areas where local eviction controls have expired, like in some of the areas in Texas, you see more and more landlords filing eviction notices against people. And so there's a estimated up to about 20 million households who could be affected by potential eviction over the next couple months. So this is a huge wave of evictions. And where are you going to go if you don't have a job? You're not going to be able to rent a new place. And so this is just on top of the economic crisis, on top of the growing pandemic. You also have this likelihood of a wave of evictions and homelessness and a housing crisis coming up. The other thing, I said there were two big things. For the first time since March, the first time in 4 months, the new claims for weekly unemployment actually went up in the week ending July 18th. So that report came out Thursday, and it goes up to the previous Saturday. And the weekly unemployment claims has been the most, I think, important of the weekly claims. Normally, a lot of economic information comes out monthly, and usually that's fine. Things don't change that much month to month, but all that changed starting back in February, where things started changing really quickly. And what happened is we saw a huge rise in unemployment claims. The peak, I think they were close to 10 million in 1 week. And then since early March, they've been dropping off slowly but steadily. And so this is actually a turnaround representing that there's a growing number of people who are losing their jobs. And this was not unexpected given the expansion of the pandemic and the fact that a number of different business indicators, number of restaurant reservations being made, things like that, showed that people were pulling back from going out to eat, from going shopping, etc. And so this is also now being reflected in the labor market information. The other thing, for the first time, is all 50 states were offering federal extended benefits. This is also something else that came out with the CARE package in March, but it's only offered to people who have exhausted, who have run through the normal 6 months, or in some states it's less, state unemployment. And so what it's showing is there's basically now across the country, there's significant numbers of people who have been out of work for 6 months. So they were laid off before the COVID-19 recession crisis hit, but because of the crisis, they haven't been able to find a job. And now they're extending the extended benefits. There was also a small increase in the number of people collecting the federal pandemic unemployment assistance. And this was mainly designed to cover self-employed people, gig workers, contract workers, small business people who are not covered by the regular state unemployment. So that number has risen now again. Together it points to the fact of a weakening in the labor market, and the fact that now more than ever, you need economic support for people. And one thing, I want to point out is a lot of times Republicans like to point out that a number of people who are getting the $600 a week, extra benefits, are actually earning more than what they get when they were working. And they argue that, oh, this is preventing people from getting a job or from wanting to take a job. And so, of course, the first question is, well, what job are they supposed to take? So that's an obvious no-brainer. A second one is a lot of those people who are actually collecting more are mainly low-wage workers. And so what we've had especially over the last 20 years or so, it's sped up, but it's been going on for longer than that, is more and more people are either earning very low wages because the minimum wage has not been keeping up with inflation, or because they can only get part-time or contract or temporary work. And so you have this phenomenon, for example, more and more workers qualifying to get government aid even as they work. And so I think that's another problem, is basically it shows not that people are getting too much, but that a lot of people had jobs that were not paying a living wage. And then the third and last thing is part of the whole point of having these expanded benefits is from the point of view of trying to defeat this pandemic, we need to have people be able to stay home, not travel, not take public transportation, not work with a lot of other people, and possibly spread the infection. And so that's where these benefits are not really the traditional sort of Keynesian economic stimulus, where the government provides more money to people so they can spend the money so they can buy things, but it's actually should be seen more as a type of disaster relief. And in this disaster, most disasters, you basically want to get people out, right, when there's flooding or fires. But in this case, it's not in all disasters. I think when you're in a tornado, you should just stay put. But I don't know because I haven't been in one. Luckily, we have anyway. But in this disaster we're facing, what we actually need is for people to be able to stay home and not to go out and go to indoor restaurants or other malls or things like that. And so I think it's actually very important for us to do. Now, why are we in this situation today where, this deadline has been coming up? It was in the original CARES Act. It was a compromise because the Republicans, sort of didn't want it. And many Democrats, or some Democrats, wanted it even, through the end of the year. So it was a compromise. So it was known to have happened. And so part of the thing in my thinking is that a lot of Republicans, including in particular Donald Trump, they think the stock market represents the economy. And so what we've seen happen is after initial tumble in March and early April, the stock market has come roaring back. In fact, the technology heavy NASDAQ index has hit a record high recently. And so a lot of them are thinking, well, things really aren't that bad because the stock market is really doing well. And the fact of the matter is a lot of these senators, not just Republicans, but most of the people in the Senate are millionaires, right? And they have stock holdings and they know other people have stock holdings and they're doing okay. But most people don't own stocks individually outside of their 401k accounts. And for most of us, 90% of people, it's really about how is our job doing, or if we have a small business, how's our small business doing, not how our stocks are doing. I think another aspect of it is similar to the whole Republican effort to overturn the Affordable Care Act and their opposition to universal health care. They say, they say they're going to replace the healthcare system with something better. In fact, Trump's talking about it again. But the bottom line is they have no plan. They don't even know. And so, the Republicans have had 4 months basically to say, okay, let's do a plan B, right? The economy isn't looking good. What can we agree upon? And of course, they basically waited around and hoped the crisis would go away. In some ways, it's similar to Trump's approach to the pandemic, is just wait and it'll magically disappear. And in economics, there's actually a whole school of thought that argues that free market, a capitalist economy, will automatically restore itself to full employment. Now, I haven't actually heard or read of senators saying that, but I think that's pretty ingrained in a lot of economics courses, and I think it's probably in many of their minds, this idea that, well, things will come back because they always have. Of course, they didn't during the Great Depression until World War II came around. Anyway, maybe, did I want to say anything else about that? Yeah, why don't we take some questions? I'm sorry? Oh, okay. So, let's see. Well, I'll be honest with you. I haven't had much experience. Well, I haven't had much experience being unemployed, which is actually lucky of me. Although I do want to note that one of the things that I was sort of pissed me off, and it's probably going to piss off some people next year when your taxes come due, is that unemployment insurance benefits are taxed by the federal government. And so if you haven't marked withholding, which I understand if people don't, because you need that money, right? I mean, that's the whole point. It's not an extra benefit. It's like, oh, I'm missing my whole paycheck. I need it. I need it now. But they're going to try and take back some of your unemployment benefits next year. And that's just the way the system's set up. It's not fair, but I know I was unemployed briefly in the 70s, and it was the same thing back then. So to me, the most important thing about organizing the unemployed and economic struggles is I think that there's sort of two ways you can go. And I'm not an expert on either of them. I mean, one way is if you are in a union and you're either still employed or there's a whole bunch of you who aren't employed, to try organizing through your union if at all possible. And the advantages of that is that you have a structure and you also may have a union where a lot of people, or even almost everybody, if you're represented by in the entertainment industry or hotel and restaurant industry, or maybe you have large numbers, I shouldn't say almost everybody, you'll have a large number of workers, union members who have been laid off. And this offers an opportunity to reach out and contact them and try and have an influence. But I know that unions only cover a small part of the workforce. And so I think if you're not unionized, then a lot of the economic issues around unemployment, around evictions and so forth, they really need to be sort of based in a community among people who are in a similar situation and yet you can talk to. And so I think it also depends on where you live, what kinds of opportunities there are. I do think the most immediate thing is around I think there's, I would say actually there's two immediate things. One is around demanding that the unemployment benefits, the extra unemployment benefits be extended. And somewhat similar to that, one of the aspects of the CARES Act that's also expiring at the end of July is that one of the provisions on it is that all federally insured mortgages, the people who are buying homes with mortgages backed in one way or another by the federal government, they can get what's called forbearance, which usually means you can just tack your payments on to the end. And so it means you're not late, you're not going to get foreclosed on, and you don't get any extra money, and you owe it again at the end. And that's a protection for home buyers. But the other thing, it covers people who are living in apartment buildings where the landlord's got some kind of federally backed mortgage. And so I think that if you're organizing and if you're talking to your Congress people or contacting them, and senators mentioned that both the extra $600 unemployment benefits and the tenant protection should be extended. And then many local areas passed eviction moratoriums during this period. This is a short-term solution. It's not a real solution because basically for a lot of people, their rent has been piling up. And so it's like, okay, moratorium's over. Even if the economy recovers now, you're supposed to pay like 7 months of rent, but who has that? But at least it means not trying to get evicted in the middle of a recession and a pandemic. So I think trying to extend those on a local level. And again, this will depend place to place. Some places have already or are doing this, but that's another thing to possibly look at. All right. Let's go on to the health insurance issue. So this is actually the health insurance issue is it's going to be a bigger and bigger issue, because for most Americans, about 55% prior to the crisis of us, including myself and my wife, we get our health insurance through our job. And of course, when our job ends, so does our health insurance. And so while there are other options, they're generally more expensive. And I think the only thing that's one reason it hasn't come to the fore is a lot of people have not been doing a lot of non-COVID health-related activity, which I'm not a doctor. I don't want to get into how much you should be or shouldn't be doing that, but it's a normal thing. But life goes on, and in the fall and winter, the regular seasonal flu will roll around, and we'll start to see that. And again, I mean, fundamentally, we really need a universal government or so-called single-payer healthcare system. Again, I haven't actually. I've been whatever. I've been better off in the sense that I have a job and I have health insurance, but that is another issue that's going to come up. I do want to mention that part of the reason the United States, because we're doing really badly. Just to disagree with our president, we're doing really badly in terms of the pandemic. We have the most infections in the world. We're about a quarter of the world's infections and a quarter of the deaths, even though we're only about 5% of the world's population. And we're also, very wealthy country, but our for-profit healthcare system has really not prepared us for a pandemic. And one of the reasons is that the whole drive in the healthcare system in order to maximize profits is to cut costs. And the way you cut one of the ways you cut costs is you try and be more so-called efficient. You want to reduce the number of beds that are available. And it's sort of like if you're a restaurant, you don't want to have a whole bunch of empty tables all the time. That doesn't make sense. But healthcare is not a restaurant. If there's a big surge of people who want to eat at your restaurant and you can't seat them all well, then you lose out on some business, right? But it's not like those people who can't eat in your restaurant are all going to go hungry and starve. And that's the problem we have right now. One of the problems we have right now with our healthcare system is that we have fewer beds, and then along with that, minimized staffing and so forth that's able to handle a big wave that you get whenever you have a pandemic. And this is where some countries are much better prepared in that way, like countries like South Korea had a lot more beds, and they were more prepared in other ways. But it's getting a little beyond the economy, and so let's see. Wow. All right, now there's an interesting question here about how will the recession or depression affect imperialist ventures? How do you think Trump will try to invade other countries? That's an interesting question, because a lot of people, and I think it's actually true to an extent, say one of the factors leading up to World War II was, in fact, the Depression, where the Axis power of fascist fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, and then the military rule in Japan, who were all hit. They all had capitalist economies. They were all actually hit by the Depression earlier than the United States. And so what they did is they adopted big spending programs. And in part, it wasn't the main reason. The main reason they built up their militaries was to conquer other countries, but it had the side effect of boosting, at least temporarily, employment and jobs and the economy in their countries. I don't think the same thing quite holds true with the United States. I think there's two other concerns besides the recession that are more concerning. The short term, of course, is President Trump. While generally I don't believe in what are often called wag the dog theories, that wars start for domestic political purposes, Mr. Trump is a little bit of an outlier when it comes to being president. And, there are some people, mainly Republicans, who said, well, he's a little bit of a crackpot individual, but once he gets into the presidency, the system is going to sort of adjust it. And this has actually been true. Unfortunately, there's some individuals who have actually been good people, but once they get to be president, they do some really bad policies because they're now the head of the U.S. empire. And so Mr. Trump, they thought the same thing would apply, but I'm not sure. So I think it's possible that intentionally or unintentionally, Trump will try and ratchet up, adjust it. And this is actually do that. I mean, I think the main thing against that is, I think, as his leadership as commander-in-chief in the war against the COVID-19 is any sign, he would be a total disaster if he tried to lead the U.S. Into the war. So that's on the short term. And hopefully we won't have to deal with that in another 6 months. But the more medium term, it is a concern is that there's a growing wave of anti-China sentiment. You see the anti-China actions by the US government, from sort of banning and going all out to attack Huawei, one of China's most successful technology companies, shutting down the Chinese consulate in Houston. And now there's even a lot of talk about banning TikTok, which is I guess I'll be honest, I've never seen TikTok. I don't subscribe to it. But it's a video streaming stuff that evidently mainly young people post cute videos on, and somehow it's thought that the Chinese government will be able to use the fact that you prefer watching cute cats to cute dogs to somehow manipulate you and undermine the U.S. government. It's just crazy, but it's almost like, well, if it's Chinese and it's popular, then it must be bad, must be part of their evil plot. But so there is all of this anti-China stuff, and the U.S. is building up military forces, and in fact has made plans. They just carried out exercises about invading islands in the South China Sea, which are not even claimed or anything. They're thousands of miles away from any U.S. territories, but is a very aggressive action. And so, it would be suppose Chinese People's Liberation Army, Navy started doing exercise. Oh, we're just doing exercise to liberate a U.S. Foreign base somewhere in the Caribbean, right? And would the U.S. say, oh, well, they're just fantasizing, and it's international ocean and stuff like that? No. Anyway, it's very aggressive. Let's see. So I think it is a little bit of a concern, but I think the biggest concern, it's not purely economic or mainly an economic one. It's about the U.S. attempts to contain China. There's an interesting question. Do you believe this new generation of 18 to 30-year-olds know how to organize? Well, when I was 18 years old, I would say, hell yeah. No, I mean, the fact of the matter is that I think it's a really good thing that young people are organizing in all kinds of different ways, and being very creative about it. Young people were out in the streets in the days and nights following the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I think those protests have created a whole wave of other protests and around other victims of police crimes, around the whole issue of the U.S. U.S. government hanging on to symbols of the Confederacy and slavery. All kinds of things have, I think, come into question, and it's been a really overall positive movement. And I think that the main thing, the fact of young people getting into the streets has been really positive. I see it here in the Bay Area. I know a lot of the neighborhoods. I've lived here basically about 60 years, let's say. And I see a lot of smaller towns and cities, some even wealthier areas where I've never seen protests before, especially young people, a lot of high school students that did protests around Black Lives Matters in the wake of George Floyd. So I think overall it's really positive. I mean, the one thing, maybe this is what got the Trump administration, is I understand that there was a large group of, and this is all secondhand, I don't even know, but evidently it's reported that a large group of TikTok and K-pop fans organized through their networks and bought like 800,000 tickets or signed up for 800,000 tickets at the rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so the Trump campaign actually did have like 900,000 registrations, but at least 800,000 of them or more were actually fake ones. And it seems that young people organized this. I don't think it's quite the same as being in the street, but it was sort of it was a real black eye. And I think the media actually downplayed it because Trump was expecting to fill this 30,000 seat convention hall and had built a whole outdoor stage for overflow. So they literally thought they might get like 50,000 people or something. And instead, like 6,000 people showed up. So it's just a huge embarrassment for the Trump camp. And so I guess, I don't know, maybe I think a lot of that actually happened through TikTok. And so I think that's really good. So I think that's the main thing. It's really positive. And I think for those of us who are older, and have been active for a long time, because I think there's older people too who are becoming active for the first time, and they may be a little bit better on some interpersonal things or things like that. But I don't necessarily, just because you're old, if you've never organized before, it doesn't mean that you're going to be better at it. It's just like old people in technology. If we're new at it, we're not any better at it. And so I think we have to remember that when we were young, a lot of us didn't know that well, know that much either. And from my generation, I mean, actually it was problematic, is there weren't that many people who had been around and organizing and active for a long time and who were still active. And so it's actually a good thing that now we have some more experienced organizers and younger people. And, there's going to be differences in the way people organize, but it's just good to try and accommodate as many as possible. I know in a lot of places, especially where the COVID is more active, it's, people have been using car caravans, but I think in a lot of places, young people just want to march. And I think that's fine. It's like, if people feel safer in their cars, they should organize a way to go in their cars. And if they're down with going in the street, then they should go into the street, and it doesn't, it's different tactics, but it can have the same, it can work towards the same end. And so I think that's just the way we have to figure out how to actually organize, or not, we have to figure out how to order, we have to figure out how to build a movement that incorporates more and more young people as they come forward, because these are the leaders of tomorrow. And, believe me, I know at the extreme, I heard it when I was young, there would be people saying, oh, we're going to have a revolution in 20 years. Or there's a little softer version, revolution in our lifetime. And I'd really like that. But I tell you, I've been going at it for about, how long have I been going at it? Oh my goodness, about 50 years now. And, the struggle is a marathon, and there's ups and downs. So you have to be able to sprint, and you have to be able to slow down. But overall, it's a marathon. And so, but what it means is it's not like you have to run all the way to the end. Unfortunately, some of us aren't going to make it. And so hopefully I'll have to drop out of the race before everyone else who's listening to me. So as long as you outlast me, that's good. So we need new runners, new people to, in a sense, pass the baton onto. And so I think it's really good. And so I don't have, I'm a little bit, and it's not always the best thing, because I'm a teacher. I tend to be a little cautious on trying to tell younger folks how they should be, as opposed to, now, if you want to know my understanding of the economy, that I feel more confident, and I'm more likely to know more about the economy than a lot of younger folks. But I don't want to claim I do have more experience about it. But the main thing is, the question for young people is, how do you, to me, is, how do you organize other young people? And if you can use TikTok and social media to do that, that's great. I do want to say, and this again is depends on, of course, what's happening with the pandemic and the virus, is I think we have to, or it's important to realize there are limitations to social media. As I say this, it's being going on Facebook, or going through Zoom, or both, or it's going through social media. But the fact of the matter is, I think social media is a great way to inform people about things, to let people know about events, and can really play a big role when things are jumping. But I think it's a complement. It's not a substitute for real day-to-day organizing, for phone calling people, for, if possible, seeing people face to face, and getting to know people. Because I think what we're struggling for is a society where we actually, can provide for people's needs, but you really have to know people in order to do that. And I don't think you really get to know people. You can reach out to a lot of people, but you don't get to know people that well over social media. Let's see, what is our, we still have time. The other thing, I guess one piece of advice, is part of a very long question, is I think there's a lot of things going on, and I think it's important to participate, by going to protests or events or things, in as many things as possible that you think are worthy of support or you think are interesting. But in terms of organizing, I do think it's important to try and focus your efforts. I think there's a lot of people, and this isn't something necessarily that young people do, but they just have more energy to do more of it, is that can get spread out and try and be involved in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different campaigns. And it really, I think, cuts into your effectiveness. And this is really something you have to learn. What is your own capability? For some people, given their family or work or personal responsibilities or limitations they have to. One is enough. Well, then that's good, or two if you can do two. But it's important to have a focus and to build sort of a base of support or a core of people around you in order to effectively organize. And that's something that, of course, will just have to come through ending. There's one last thing, maybe to get around to the back to the economy. There was a question: do you foresee a bubble bursting in the next year? Now, I'm not sure what bubble they're talking about. If they're, I think right now there isn't. I don't see signs of a classic economic bubble, which is usually you see a lot of debt-fueled speculation in some kind of asset, and even in the stock market, which I think is, I don't want to give my opinion on the stock market, because if I knew what the stock market was going to do, you would see me behind me a penthouse view of San Francisco from the 50th story of some condominium up there. But you don't. And so I don't know, I don't want to make recommendations about stock market, but I think even the stock market, I personally think is, I don't know what's going on with it, given the economy is so bad. But I don't think it's actually a bubble. I think it could go down. I think part of it is it's gotten a lot of support. A lot of corporations who issue stock have gotten a lot of support from the Federal Reserve and some amount of support from the federal government. And then it's hard to tell. There may be one of the things that's pretty much dried up is there's not a lot of sports going on right now. And with that, that means there's not a lot of sports betting, and a lot of casinos are either closed or very limited capacity. And so evidently a lot of people, and they're stuck at home, and they're turning to the stock market. And this is problematic because, unlike gambling, in gambling, if someone wins or if you lose, that means someone else gets your money, right? Whereas in the stock market, it's possible for a lot of people to lose, and only a few people who are betting the stock would go down would do that. So if you're, whoever asked that question, well, let's see what happens this week. There's going to be a lot of corporate earnings, and I think sometimes stock investors put too much faith in Washington, D.C. and the federal government to bail them out. But if you're entrusting it to the Republican Party, your trust may be betrayed. Who knows, though? We'll see in another week. All right. I think it's probably that was it. And I guess I'll try and wrap it up now. I really appreciate, for those of you who listened to me, I'm going to be doing this again. Things again, as I said, will be interesting this coming week. And so, in fact, I might ask our organizer, like to give whatever hands up, thumbs up to Michaela, for helping to organize this. I might call her on Friday and say, hey, let's do another one on Sunday. But I would like to wrap up. I like to urge people, if you're interested in this, I write regularly articles on the economy in Fight Back newspapers. So you can look up fightbacknews.org and just look me up, Masao Suzuki, or look under the capitalism economy section of it. And then I urge people to check out the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. You can go to FRSO.org /join to find out more information about how you can join our organization and actually learn more from others of us who also have a lot of experience organizing, and a lot of experience, or a lot more than me, organizing younger folks, because the average age of our organization is under 30. So I'm somewhat of in the organization, well, somewhere between, let's just call me an OG, there's worse terms to call me. mainly that involve the letter words that begin with the letter F. So you can speculate on that. But you can look up at FRSO.org /join and check us out. And anyway, keep safe. I hope your economic situation does not deteriorate. And I hope you can learn more about what's going on and help organize for a better economy, a more just society, and a better world. Thank you.